lot of folks showing up. Saturday before the Sunday, the world's largest infinity pool, looking over the emergency spillway, which was about to be overtopped. Wow, impressive. So, were you on the water or?
Yes. In a boat.
In a boat. All right, and flip over. Let's see that other side. So we're looking at the
dam structure.
Right. Okay. Wow. And that's looking straight off into the coastal range.
That's it.
Wow.
There's the snow.
Say hi, kids. Jeannie Tuttle, the chief engineer of the whole project, right?
Yes.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going to go on here? Are you going to, this is all RCC? You're going to go with an RCC fill right there?
RCC, and then we'll have a structural concrete overlay is the plan.
So that means reinforced concrete spillway over the top of the RCC?
Yes, eventually.
And by eventually, do you mean, how do we get through next flood season?
We're working now to get a safe spillway to get through this next flood season, and we'll get as much done as we can to make sure that we preserve the upper chute and try to plug these holes so that we have a channel to minimize erosion. And depending on how far we get, then we'll contractor will continue and complete the work. We'll see how next winter treats us.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have as wet of a season, we may get a lot of this done during that over the winter. If we have a really wet season, they may take a break and then come back. Probably about a year from now when the snow melt allows us. Yeah.
After the run next season. Now, does that mean this will be completely replaced? You think by
that's the goal. We're still evaluating and doing assessments of the integrity of the structure, and then based upon the results of that, we'll direct the contractor to remove and replace the needed portions.
And then will this be opened up or closed off? Will we be using the old, the new gorge?
The plan currently is to try to plug this and use this spillway and not use the gorge. If something happens and we don't, we feel that we could lay back and make safe releases through the gorge, but we're trying to go for the gusto and get it all plugged by November.
And it's in two separate contracts. Contract 1 up here, contract 2 down
it's
here.
It's one single contract. It includes the upper chute, the lower chute, and the work on the emergency spillway, and that's the contract that went to Kiewit. A second contract that actually went out earlier was to Tiker to prepare the rosin.
Very good. Okay, well, we'll be watching with great interest. Thanks, Jeannie.
Yeah.
I saw a picture.
Oh, no, but I'd like to say a little bit if I could. How do you say your last name?
Sultanzade. I'm supposed to, you need to talk to the media,
there.
Right?
Okay.
Oh my
I was just talking with some of the DWR folks up here and about the day the evacuation occurred on the emergency spillway, and get a little more clearer answer of what they were looking for. And it's the erosion. As this canyon was carved, it's the erosion of this canyon working its way back towards the OG weir. And this OG weir, I learned today, is in sections, in segments. It's not one continuous weir. And so the concern was erosion working its way back, undermining the weir, and then one of these sections possibly toppling over. Game over at that point. I thought it was more concerned about erosion over here off of the parking lot, but it sounds to me like it was more like erosion coming off the main newly formed canyon. So all the blasting that's going on right now is up in this area, and then specifically
From this road upstream.
From this road upstream to get rid of this knob to make it safe for workers down in this canyon.
Right.
So that's the blasting going on at present. It's Friday morning, the 28th of April. We're looking at 43,000 CFS outflow total, most of that coming down the broken spillway and a small portion coming out of the Hyatt power plant this morning. Current lake level is at 843 feet and dropping. Remember, they're going to drop this down to about 835 feet, the bottom of the entry to the main spillway, and shut it off. From there, they're going to need to do one more spill this runoff season. Last night was the big DWR meeting, public outreach meeting, and it was a doozy. I got a lot of material to cover in a short time to get there. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the Blanco Lirio channel. Before we get into the minutes of the DWR public outreach meeting, a couple issues folks have been talking about. The blasting is going on right up in there. They're continuing to work this cliffside back, reduce the angle of repose and make it safer for workers down in the canyon after they shut this thing off so they can get down there and work safely. There's a couple of big rocks up there towards the spillway that they want to blast out of the way or get out of the way for the workers below. So that low-level blasting is going on right up there as they continue to pull back this the angle of this cliff here. And then over here on the dam, a big issue that's an old and persistent issue, but is more obvious this time of year in the springtime, is the seeping from the main dam, resulting in a big patch of green grass over there. So we'll talk about that soon too, and that came up in last night's meeting. Inflows to the reservoir right now are running about 18 to 29,000 CFS. So last night's DWR community outreach meeting was held at the Butte County Fairgrounds in Gridley, California, and is the first of a series of meetings. And the place was packed, and all the main players were there, including Bill Croyle, who pretty well hosted the whole thing and started the whole thing off with a very heartfelt apology to everybody in the community. The two assemblymen, Gallagher and Nielsen, were also there, and a lot of the engineers, including Jeannie Cuddled, one of the main engineers for the restoration of this spillway. In the room, there was a lot of, how shall I say, pissed off farmers and genuinely scared local residents. The farmers have been dealing with DWR for years and really let them know how they feel they've been treated over all of these years. When you get a disaster like this, you get a lot of collateral damage, but when you meet that collateral damage face to face with their trembling rage in their eyes, it opens your eyes to the situation, to the human scale of the situation, of what it caused to the folks downstream. After Bill Croyle's big apology, he jumped into a brief PowerPoint presentation, but quickly just went through that and got right to the question and answer period part of the meeting, and that lasted all the way until 11 o'clock at night. They did a good job of allowing everybody to be heard. And that meeting started at 6 p.m. and ran all the way till 11. And some of the primary things folks were most upset about during this whole episode was a lack of a clear explanation of what happened, why it happened, how it happened, and a lack of a clear explanation of where we're going with this disaster. And coupled with that, the lack of transparency from the Department of Water Resources. These are some of the issues that just continue to get hammered all night long. There were a couple of classic one-liners that came out of the meeting last night. One was Bill Croyle himself. He said, the Department of Water Resources maintenance record speaks for itself, and it does. Farmer Ryan Sloan, I believe his last name is, gave an impassionate speech, and his concern was about about critical energy infrastructure information. It's not the terrorists that we're worried about, he says. It's the DWR maintenance of this facility is what's the threat. And he also voiced concern about the mainstream media just kind of not diving deep enough into the issue. And the first thing that comes over the news during this whole disaster is that they've rescued 2 million fish instead of the people, ahead of the people. I always want to try and avoid politics, but at some point you can't help it. I know these videos are being watched around the world, and a lot of people get the impression that California is just a bunch of liberals, the way California ends up voting. But you got to look at those red and blue maps a lot closer, county by county and district by district, and you'll find that outside of the big cities, northern rural California is largely very conservative. And the folks and the farmers at Gridley last night were a good group of hard-working conservative folks. And they have been putting up with this for years. The management of the water in the lower Feather River has been an ongoing problem, and we'll discuss some of these numbers that work and don't work for the farmers downstream. And along with that conservative sentiment, there was almost universal agreement in the room about California Governor Brown's mismanagement of funds for the state of California that go a long way to creating disasters like this. According to the farmers this last night, this level of flow, 35 to 40,000 CFS, is just killing them downstream. This time of year, the farmers need to see a flow of around 20,000 CFS or less in order to prevent flooding and continued deterioration of their orchards downstream. But unfortunately, DWR is stuck running this spillway this hard in order to prevent further erosion of this main spillway. And as another farmer pointed out, he understood the whole workings of the Hyatt power plant and the river valve outlet system that we've talked about in the past. And he understood the fact that had we had that little bit more redundancy here with the river valve outlet system, we may have been able to avoid some of these bigger, heavier spills and more likely maintained a more reasonable spill rate closer to 20,000 CFS to get us through even this emergency. The river valve outlet system is not planned to be back in place until the end of May time frame. At about that same time, end of May, they should have I believe they're going to have the #1 turbine back in place and have the Hyatt power plant up and operating again, so that this summer they'll have the Hyatt power plant and river valve outlet system up and operating, so that they'll be able to get 12 to 13,000 CFS out of the Hyatt, plus 13, 14, 15, yeah, another 4,000 out of the RVOS, for a total of 17,000 CFS out of the Hyatt power plant. And that's how they're going to primarily be able to keep this spillway dry and control the reservoir throughout this construction period, is flows through the Hyatt power plant. Once DWR gets this spillway shut off for good this summer, they're still not sure what lake elevation they're going to run with throughout the summer. That still is yet to be determined. There's some legitimate concern with the local population that perhaps 850 feet is too high of a reservoir elevation for adequate flood control here at Oroville. The folks that have lived here long enough throughout the history of this dam, this is not their first rodeo. They have gone through no less than 4 evacuations due to conditions over the years here at Oroville. Now, that being said, if there was no dam, this place would be getting flooded out regularly. So the locals want DWR and everybody in the California aqueduct system to look at that 850-foot elevation. Is that overly greedy amount of water storage here at Oroville in order to retain that water for folks downstream, putting the folks right here in the Oroville area at risk? At risk for high flows, high spring runoffs that water managers are simply unable to safely manage. Regarding the cost and who's going to pay is still up in the air, and those costs are going to continue to go up as there are going to be legitimate claims from folks downstream who've been financially affected by this disaster. But some numbers did come up. 247 million have been spent so far, and of course the contract is for $275 million to rebuild that spillway. So round that off to a cool $500 million so far. In my experience, nobody knows the local ecosystem better than the sportsmen, and a couple of fishing guides got up last night that have been fishing that lower Feather River for over 40 years, and they've observed the deterioration and the sedimentation of the Feather River caused by operations here at DWR, and they too would like to see additional money spent in cleaning up 40 years of mismanagement of the lower Feather River. Regarding those claims, Bill Croyle did pledge to honor legitimate claims by those affected downstream. I'd like to clarify for folks downstream to not misunderstand design limits of the new design here at Oroville versus operational limits or operational demands of the reservoir. They're going to rebuild this main spillway to have a capacity something on the order of 270,000 CFS. Now next year it's only going to be 150,000 CFS next year as we get the first interim temporary permanent solution to this spillway. But ultimately this main spillway, something on the order of 270 to 300,000 CFS capacity. The emergency spillway just this next year is going to have a capacity of approximately 30,000 CFS, but the design that they just recently released talks about an ultimate design capacity for the emergency spillway of over 300,000 CFS, for a combined total of a biblical 600,000 or 700,000 CFS if you were to run them both totally together. Of course, that just means inundation of everything downstream, all in an effort to save the Oroville Dam. They still never intend to use the emergency spillway. The emergency spillway is like a slow blow fuse. It allows people to evacuate, give them the time they need to evacuate without losing the dam. That being said, we know historically, operationally, that 160,000 CFS is the maximum that the levees downstream can absorb. So water needs to be managed so that that 160,000 is not exceeded. Anytime you get anywhere up to that or over that, you're back in an evacuation situation. Regarding those peak inflows, this year we peaked out in, February at nearly 197,000 CFS, a brief peak, and dropped off quickly. And back in 1997, the time of the previous evacuation, the historically tallest inflow this reservoir has ever seen was achieved at 350,000 CFS. There was some concern at the meeting last night about the spring runoff still yet to come with the remaining amount of snow. DWR is modeling, I believe, something inflows along the lines of 20 to 30,000 CFS throughout this spring runoff season. Most of the snow, a lot of the snow has already been melted. The snow level is quite high right now. I'm going to go up to the high country this weekend and take a close look for myself and see how much snow is left. There is 12, 14 feet of snow maybe left in some of the highest points of the Sierra, but that snow is concentrated at a very high elevation whose climate is considerably different than down here in the valley. By the end of the brief, Bill Croyle wanted to assure everybody that we are safe here with the Oroville Dam situation, and there's going to be boating allowed on the reservoir this year. Now, to get a closer look at the blasting that's going on and the wet spot in the dam, the persistent green wet spot in the dam, let's go up in the Luscombe. I finally got the inspection done on the airplane, and I could show you from the air a little better about what we're talking about. So there's the green area folks are talking about right there. Now it's right next to this embankment of the dam here. The engineers at the DWR meeting last night claimed that this was a spring. Now if you look at the old reports, this is an ongoing long issue. In the inspection reports they call this a seep. Remember, this is an earth-filled dam with a clay core. The idea of an earth-filled dam with a clay core is like a self-sealing fuel tank in World War II. In other words, if you were to develop a leak in the clay core of this dam. That clay is surrounded by sand and smaller material that's designed to fill in that hole as water moves through it. Now that may be the case here, or it might be a spring, as DWR says, with water flowing right out of here into the dam, or it could be a seep, as the reports say. We don't know, but I'm not concerned about it at this point. This has been here for years. Here's the excerpt from the 2015 dam inspection report, that middle paragraph. And what concerns folks perhaps more than anything is that here's another situation, another case where the inspectors say do something, in this case monitor, set up a means of monitoring this situation, and from DWR we can't get any answers as to what has been done and what does the situation look like at present. Here we are approaching Oroville Dam in the mighty Luscombe, and by the way, the temporary flight restriction has been removed. You can see the big green spot on the right. So a citizen brought up the point that perhaps the dam has settled more on the left side of the dam, looking from this view, than it has on the right, based on the topography underneath the dam, thus causing the seep. Now here's Pete to remind us that all dams leak, and this is taken yesterday, the 28th of April, at Shasta Dam, a concrete block dam. You can see the wet spot right there. We took the full tour, which I highly recommend, and when you get down inside the dam, you can hear the water rushing through the gallery system, the drain system inside the dam. So I sent the kids down for a little closer look. We'll have a more complete report on Shasta Dam in the future, and meanwhile, stay tuned as things develop back at Oroville. See you here.